Shalom. Welcome to Understanding the World with Rabbi David Kaufman. I'm joined today by Mark Finkelstein, who is the Jewish Community Relations Director for the Jewish Federation of Greater Des Moines. And this is The World in 5 Minutes. This week, there have been a number of different things that happened. I'm not going to go through them in any particular order, but there's some important things to note. One of the first is that there was a boycott, divestment, and sanctions proposal made at Oxford University. People tried to get the university to boycott the state of Israel, including an academic boycott, meaning that professors, books, anything coming out of Israel essentially would be banned for use by the university and by its professors. Well, this fell flat on its face, which was a wonderful thing because it sets an example for other institutions where this might be proposed. And the reason it fell flat on its face was, frankly, because the students and professors at Oxford said, how can you have a boycott against ideas? We're an institution of ideas. This doesn't make any sense at all. And the vote was overwhelmingly opposed to boycotting Israel or even institutions in the West Bank. Another thing that's going on, and frankly, the big news that's going on in the United States, every newscast is talking about this, is the sequester and the impact of what is going to happen in budget cuts. The current budget proposals will, in fact, harm the defensive capabilities of the United States and will, in fact, harm foreign aid, including to Israel. And everyone is saying we need to get around this. One of the ways that they're proposing to get around this, as far as Israel is concerned, is to consider give Israel a new designation as a major strategic ally, which is a designation that no other nation has. And the idea of that is that aid to Israel could then be separated out from aid to anybody else. That is a way to avoid the fact that should real major defense cuts or should the sequester go through, basically, instead of costing Israel the ability to have another Iron Dome system or something else to defend itself from rocket attacks from Iran, Syria, Lebanon, or Gaza at a time when all of those are relatively likely, that Israel could then be provided that, and it would be of benefit, strategic benefit, not only to Israel, but obviously to the United States as well, as it holds the line against Iran and against radical Islamists who do not like the United States. You also have going on in the West Bank and Gaza right now an attempt to start a new intifada, at least it appears to be that way, by radicals, and potentially even by the government itself. The Palestinian Authority has very little to yield in negotiations, in peace negotiations, other than conceding on violence. And if there is no violence going on, you can't concede violence. It's simply not a possibility. So there's a belief that in order to get anywhere in a negotiating position, the Palestinians have to start violence in order to ramp it down again. This is a position taken by a number of the radical groups. Hamas has repeatedly argued that the only way to get any progress is through violence. And it's fairly clear that the world wants to quiet the violence. The world wants peace to such a point that should there be ongoing violence and should it be costing lives of people on either side, the Israeli side or the Palestinian side, pressure will be brought to bear on Israel to make concessions to calm the violence. And so it makes sense to ramp up the violence in order to institute that. But Israel has gotten to the point where it's not willing to make concessions to stop the violence because it understands this whole process. So in essence, there's some question whether or not the Palestinian side would simply be wasting lives and wasting money and doing and causing serious suffering, promoting this position. And so there is opposition against it among the leadership. There is a development right now in the foreign policy of the United States with John Kerry and Chuck Hagel, now as Secretary of State and Secretary of Defense, in that we seem to have the development of a softer foreign policy, quote unquote, meaning that we seem to be more interested in promoting discussion with people who are unwilling to talk to us, or who are willing to talk to us so long as their agenda of arming themselves and continuing toward increased militarization is able to take place. Working with Iran, working with Hezbollah, talking to them while they increase their weaponry and develop stronger weaponry to use against us would seem to make little sense, but that is exactly what seems to be going on right now. And then finally, we talked a lot about the Israeli coalition, and we'll talk more about it during our show today. The Israeli coalition development efforts by Benjamin Netanyahu seem to be moving forward in a way in which the secular parties, Yesh Atid and Jewish Home, headed by Yair Lapid and Naftali Bennett, respectively, seem to be in line to be a part of the coalition along with Israel Beitenu, that's Benjamin Netanyahu's party, Israel Beitenu and Likud, Benjamin Netanyahu's party, and creating a coalition with some of the parties on the center left, like Hatnuah and maybe Kadima. And this coalition would primarily be designed to put forward a new code of national service. It is functionally going to come across as hostile to the ultra-Orthodox Haredi parties, and there is a lot of anger among those parties for the development of that coalition, and we'll talk much more about that in detail. So as we develop, as this week goes on, it's fairly clear that developments in Syria, developments with Hezbollah, developments with Lebanon are getting much and much worse, and in the weeks ahead, in fact, not in the days ahead, we're going to see a lot happening on those fronts. That is the week in 5 minutes.